We are talking today about Leviticus. I'll throw in there as well. Get in a good church.
Full transparency, this is something I've struggled with a lot in the past.
I don't know 100% the validity of this. Hey everybody, thanks for checking out another episode of Basically Biblical. We have another guest today going on with the series that we're doing. And it's another one I met through a group on Facebook. She actually reached out to me, and I thought her story sounded really, really interesting. Like it could be very impactful and powerful for people. It's one that I don't think is talked about a lot. There's a lot of, I've seen people kind of come out of this that they're very, very hush-hush about it as they come out of it. But before we go into any more detail, I will throw it over. I'll let Shelby give any type of introduction she wants to for herself before we get into the nitty-gritty.
Sure. So my name is Shelby Hohsfield, and I grew up in a mixed faith home. I'll get into that a little bit more here in a bit. And my faith journey was a very winding road. It was not straightforward at all. And it took me a really long time to find God, to find Jesus. And after I did, I just felt like I had such an impactful just completely life-changing event in finding Jesus. And so now I actually do help other women who have left the Mormon church to also navigate this road of finding faith. And really, I like to help women who have been out of it for a while, and because it took me 20 years to find Jesus after I left. And so, through all those different little spaces, helping them through that. And so I do have a podcast myself, Finding Faith Above, where I do help people with that.
Okay, sounds good. So, like I mentioned, this is one that admittedly, I did not know very much about Mormonism. I grew up in a Christian home, and I really saw Mormonism as like a branch of Christianity. Like I had no idea the doctrine or anything like that. And as I kind of started getting into theology and some evangelism type stuff, I started realizing that there's a lot of differences there. There's a lot of things that really don't mesh with what we would call Orthodox Christianity. And what I've typically found is a lot of people that come out of it, a lot of people end up just leaving faith altogether. And the ones that don't, they're still pretty reserved to talk about what it was like for them. I know a lot of the stories I've heard, I won't get into a lot of detail because we want to hear about your experience. So we'll go back to you, Shelby. I know you said you grew up in that home. So let's hear maybe some of your upbringing and then leading into you kind of leaving and making that decision.
Sure. So I'm going to give you my whole breakdown of my journey. And I do want to preface this with saying, I know everybody's journey is completely different, including those in the Mormon church. And I've spent quite a bit of time talking to, studying, going through this journey that women do have out of coming out of the church. And I think we think it's all the same for everyone who's left the Mormon church, and it's not. And a big part of that for myself, very much so, is the fact that I came from more of a mixed faith home, not fully Mormon.
Okay.
And even though that's where I went to church, that's what I did, and that's who I identified as growing up. So my dad was in the Mormon church. He was a convert when he was a teenager. And when he kind of completely fell off of that, my parents ended up getting pregnant with me when they were still very young and got married and tried to make it work. And my dad was drinking a lot, having a lot of issues with life. And I think my mom kind of gave him an ultimatum, like, you got to get your life together. And he went back to the only time and stability I think he had ever known, to the people who he felt like had welcomed him in. And so he went back to the Mormon church, which started a very interesting journey for my parents, because my mom at first was like, oh, great, he's finding God, let's do this. And so she was, okay, let's figure this out. Let's see what we need to do. And I think she very quickly realized she wasn't she wasn't ever going to fit in there. That was not what she wanted to do. So my mom, still to this day, my parents are still married 40 some years, and they're still married. However, my dad is still very much a devout Mormon, involved in all the stuff, has been involved in all the things. But my mom has never actually joined the church. And that is a very different story than most people. Being the oldest child, growing up in that them wrestling with this brought up so much, because if you know anything about the Mormon church, it is all consuming. It is not just you go to church on Sundays. It is how you dress, how you talk, who you talk to, what you watch, everything about everything, and everything about everything according to this social circle that I was in was Mormon. However, I had a mom who was saying, but I won't do that. And I mean, that was just mind blowing growing up. Like, if this is the way that you're actually going to get to spend eternity with us, why would you choose not to?
Right.
Like, it was so confusing. And at 8, that is the age in the Mormon church where you then become baptized. And so then it became massive amounts of pressure, because I had my dad, who, of course, I'm wanting to please, and I'm wanting to, have him proud of me. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to get baptized, not because I felt Jesus or anything like that, but because I wanted to make him happy. And then I had my mom, who was like, don't do it. Don't do it. But she couldn't say that. And she never once ever took us to a different church or did something different. She just said, I won't do it. But she also knew that, like, my dad had the authority in the home and he was going to take us. And so we still went with him. But that really started my whole thing of actually wanting faith.
Right.
Because at 8, it then became like very apparent that I don't have it. This isn't something that I'm wanting to do because I have faith. It was something that I was told to pray about. I prayed to God like every night. I'd cry myself to sleep. God, just tell me the church is true. Just tell me the church is true. And I was very mad at him because he didn't ever tell me that. He never said yes. I was about 10 years old. So I didn't end up doing it when I was 8. I didn't end up getting baptized. And at 10, I finally was like, you know what? I want to make my dad happy. I had stayed after with him doing some stuff at the church, kind of community service type stuff. And I saw him working so hard. And I remember sitting there thinking, like, I really would just like to make him happy. And so I told him, I think I want to get baptized. And I mean, of course, he's over the moon. Interesting fact about this that I didn't realize until even just a few years ago. I didn't know this. Okay, so like I'm 41 now, so that's a long time ago. But I didn't realize that if you do not get baptized at 8 in a Mormon home, that you are then considered a convert for the rest of your life. Even though I was 10, I am in their records considered a convert. I didn't know that. So like, I wasn't able to just get baptized. I had to have missionaries come. They had to go through the whole gospel with me there, according to the Mormon church.
Right.
I had to listen to all of that. They had to be there at my baptism. It wasn't like I did this then with my family.
Right.
Which was interesting.
Yeah. No, so just to kind of interject, it sounds like,
yeah.
Like I said, I've seen several people talk about this, and I'd say it sounds like you have a very different dynamic than really what I've seen very much of at all. Just the fact that you had not even two like religions, I guess, two different parents, but it was just kind of a Mormonism and a non-Mormonism. And we can get in this too. I know that, again, not every experience is the same, but I know from what I've seen, a lot of people, and I see this with I see this with Mormonism. I see this with Jehovah's Witness. I've seen it a lot with Islam. But a lot of times, if you leave, it's very much a shunning. Like, you're not like, and that makes it hard too, because like you said, that was consuming like everything. And so that, I think, does a lot to keep people in too, because all your family is there, all your friends are there. Like, that is your social stuff. Like, in total, is there at the church and the body that's there. But no, that's an interesting. I hadn't thought about that, and I hadn't realized that that was your story too. So that would be a very, I would imagine, difficult dynamic to grow up with, trying to please both parents and really not being able to at all please both parents.
Yeah, and we weren't really allowed to talk about God, like at home.
Okay.
We would pray before we ate, but we prayed the Mormon way. Kind of the language that you use.
Right.
It isn't like we were actually praying to God. Very much a big part of the Mormon culture, though, is to pray. So, like, I mean, because it's so feelings based, like, you don't go back to the Bible for truth, you go to your feelings for truth.
Yeah.
And so it was very much encouraged to pray all the time. And so I did pray a lot on my own, but God doesn't answer crazy things. So. So it was an interesting dynamic to grow in. I would say I very much considered myself a Mormon. However, I I never felt God there. Like I was constantly felt like I was searching for faith. And I talk about this a little bit with some different things that I do too with my podcast and whatnot. That faith, I mean, faith according to the Mormon Church very much is it's kind of buying into this belief. It's like agreeing with the belief system.
Right.
It's not actually having a relationship with God. And so I just felt like I lacked faith. I always lacked faith because I lacked this belief in this system. And so that was very confusing. Now, my best friend in high school was also part of the LDS church. That's who I went to church with. However, I wasn't quite Mormon enough, I felt like, for her. So when we were at church, she kind of didn't pay as much attention to me. But then when we were outside of church, then I was the friend. So it was always, I always kind of like had this feeling of not quite being Mormon enough. I mean, I had a woman tell me, well, you know, your mom won't be there when you get married. Like this was like a very normal thing that I was different
Yeah.
than everyone, because everyone is the same. Like there is no, like, this was interesting to me when I did come to Christ and I did start to really explore Christianity, which I'm just like, I'm such a Bible nerd now. I love it. But the fact that there are secondary issues, tertiary issues, things that people don't necessarily agree in, that they're still brothers and sisters in Christ.
Yep.
Like in the Mormon church, like it's that way or the highway. Like there is no kind of, I mean, if there's a gray area, it's like, you don't talk about that.
Right. And that's something I think, if Christianity is done right, I think that is a good thing with Christianity, that we can. Now, don't get me wrong. I think there are things, and just from the how you phrase that, I can tell that you're in the same camp. But there are things that are primary issues that I would say, like, these affect salvation. You have to be right on these to be a Christian. But really, everything outside of that is open for debate and discussion. Secondary, tertiary issues. I have teachers that I watch, that I follow, that I really, really highly respect, that have very different views from me on different topics. I am anybody that has watched the podcast, they know I am what would be called a continuationist. I believe the gifts of the Spirit are still for today. And one of my favorite people to watch is a cessationist. He thinks the gifts died out with the apostles. But he's really good at teaching through. It's just, that's one topic we disagree on. I still consider him a brother. Anybody else, that as long as you're good on what are the primary issues, we can still fellowship. We can still lock arms and do stuff for the kingdom together. And that's something you really don't see in a lot of other beliefs. It is very much like, no, this is exactly how it is. You're sticking with it, and that's it.
Yeah. Yeah. Because I think if you're going back to the Bible for truth, I think that's where you should always be finding it. Like I said, with the Mormon church is very different than that,
Yeah.
though. A lot of it is feelings based. It's like you pray so that you have this feeling, but the feelings better align. They better align with what the prophet's saying at the time. So it's just a little bit different approach to things. Okay, so back to, I guess, how it all happened for me. So I was in high school and was definitely, someone said something the other day, and I thought this was such an interesting thing, not to get like off topic here, but they said that rules without a relationship equal rebellion. And I had to think about that. And I'm like, that was exactly where I was at, because it was all of these rules. I had no relationship with God whatsoever. And so I did just fully rebel. I mean, I did. I still was going to church every Sunday, but it was like there was no draw. I felt, because I didn't have God, I didn't feel God. I felt like I had no faith. I was looking for things in all the wrong places and was really kind of getting myself in a lot of trouble. But I was sitting in a course that we had in school for just world history, and world history often is the history of religion in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
because that's what started lots of wars and all the stuff.
Yep.
And they were talking about all these different religions and different ways of doing things. And in my life, it had always been literally Mormonism or the highway. My mom chose the highway. So was I going to choose the highway as well? And I was sitting there and I realized there was lots of different highways. There was not just one way to go out of this. And I was feeling very lost. And again, we in the Mormon church also too, the Bible, you're taught from being very little that it is the least trustworthy of all the scriptures that they have. And so it's not something that you go back to a lot. If you're wanting truth, you would go to probably to a leader, even over the scriptures.
Yeah.
So I didn't know where to go, but I was still praying to God. And I mean, make of this what you will. You can think of however you want about this, but I did end up having this kind of crazy dream that I feel like was very pivotal for me in my life. And I still remember it very clearly. And so, I mean, I don't know what dreams always mean, but in any case, I went to the supermarket. I went to the grocery store, and Jesus was there. Everyone was talking about Jesus was there. I'm like, Jesus at the supermarket? Why is Jesus at the supermarket? And they're like, yeah, he's in the fruit section. I mean, of course he'd be in the fruit section. I wouldn't know this at the time, but of course he'd be in the fruit section. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the fruit section. So I go there. And what I realized when I got there, though, is that first off, I didn't really know him, but he also didn't know me. And for whatever reason, this was like massively impactful for me. I woke up, I told my friend all about this. I'm like, holy smokes, like, I don't know what exactly this means. But I think I'm done being in the Mormon church. It was just like this, like feeling. I don't know why. I have no idea how that all kind of came about. But that still was something that I kind of kept with me for like a long time after that. I left the church officially when I was 18, and I no longer had to go with my dad. I didn't have to let him down because I went to college, and he didn't know that I didn't go anymore, because you have to go with where you live,
Right.
like with your ward. So he didn't know that I didn't go, and I just never went back. And I can kind of say, just like most people who leave the Mormon church, about 85% of people who leave God altogether, because it is really Mormonism or the highway. And so for a long time, it was like, okay, I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to deal with it. I don't want to have anything to do with it. I don't have any faith, and I don't really care to have any. And that's how I feel like a good majority of people who leave kind of feel, because they don't really know there's another option. And so that's where I was. When I got pregnant with my son, though, I felt his soul with me. And this was the first time that was like, okay, there has to be a God. If I can feel my baby's soul, that means I have a soul. That means there has to be something.
Yeah.
And I knew that I didn't have like a good representation of how to do God in my family, and I needed to figure that out. Fortunately, I'm blessed to be married to a man who did find God when he was very young. However, he wasn't really going to church or anything either. He had some different stuff happen in his life, and so but he wasn't closed off to this. He was
Right.
kind of like, well, of course there's God.
Right.
So you want to go to church? Sure, let's go to church. So I did start going. I started on this search. But this is the funny thing, is if you really have never known Jesus, or known that you could pick up the Bible and learn about him, then it gets a little funny. Like, you can go to church and you can do the things like Sunday Christians do, and you can lose that very quickly if you don't know how to get rooted in that at all.
Yeah.
And so I did. I mean, I was a wannabe Buddhist for a while. I was kind of in the New Age. I was like trying to find faith in all the wrong places other than his word.
Right.
And so it was complicated. I guess my big moment is I had some really rough things happen with my daughter. I felt like the world was just attacking her, as the world likes to do to young girls these days. telling her all the most terrible things about herself. And she came to me and told me that, this is how she was feeling. And I felt like kind of like a brick, bag of bricks got just like dumped on me. And at 12:30 in the morning, regardless of the fact that I had done all the other things and found faith in all the different ways, God is who I prayed to. And at 12:30 in the morning, I hit my knees and I basically said, I can't do this. I don't know how to do this. I know I'm not big enough. I know the world keeps telling me I'm big enough, but I am not big enough to fix this. I can't do this. And I know that you are. And I don't know how I know that, but I do. I know that you are big enough to get me through this. And I felt like he showed up. He like walked into that living room and was like, okay, I've been waiting for this for a long time, girlfriend.
Yeah.
And he told like, it was like that audible thing, like I don't hear it, but I heard it, that this wasn't going to be easy, but it was going to be okay. And he also told me to call my friend Vanessa, who I hadn't talked to since I was a kid, who just so happened to be, I hadn't talked to her forever. I wouldn't say we were even friends anymore. But she happens to be one of the strongest Christian women I've ever known. And she has really helped me through this. So, it's just like, he's like, she knows me. So go talk to her. She's going to help you through this. And that just began this amazing journey of just getting to actually know him. And so this is a funny thing, to go back to the supermarket.
Yeah.
I started reading then, I started in Matthew, beginning of the New Testament. I started reading his word, actually getting in there and reading it. And in chapter 7 talks about false prophets, talks about the fruit of the Spirit, it talks about not knowing you. And it was like, you did answer me. I just didn't have the tools to be able to hear what you were saying. And now I do. So all those years of praying, he did hear me. It's just, now I actually am able to hear it. So that's kind of my story in a nutshell. Now, like I said, I am like total Bible nerd. am just in it, and trying to also help shepherd women who have left the church, because it leaves you in such a position to be completely susceptible to the world just infiltrating all the stuff, because you're left without any tools. You leave and it's like you think, because all the language is the same, that's who God is, and it's not.
Yeah.
And so that's where I'm at.
that's one thing that I've noticed with, so I mentioned, I've kind of gotten into, I was born and raised in church, and I was the kid that I was never living right, but I knew how to pass it off as if I was in church, because I knew when to raise my hands in service, so everyone would think I'm good. Like, and so for me, really the last several years, I guess, has really been kind of digging in on my own and finding a lot of the stuff that I just held because that's what I was told growing up. I've kind of shifted a lot of what my views are. A lot of it's just kind of being, like we talked about, this isn't necessarily a primary issue. This is maybe a secondary or tertiary issue. But that's, as I've been kind of getting in, because where we lived previously, there was not far from where we lived was I don't remember the name of the town, but it's a bigger Mormon temple, and so there are a lot of missionaries door to door in our area, and I wanted to be able to have a conversation with them. And there's a couple times where I would go out and I would talk to, if I saw them at my house or my neighborhood or whatever, but there was such a barrier, because like we would be talking and it's like, it sounds like we're in agreement, but we're really not in agreement, and I can't pinpoint where this is at. And so I started doing a lot of research, and really what both for Mormon and Jehovah's Witness, because we had a pretty big level of both, but really what the beliefs were, how specifically did they differentiated to Christianity, how to approach it, to actually have a conversation with them, to scrape away at what's there and get to the truth. But it's, I I've had several conversations, and I think I've gotten better at it as it's gone on. But I will say that it's Mormons, especially, I think, can be very intimidating to talk to because they know what they believe, and they will go from, I'll bring up a point, and they'll have something to maybe dispute what I said, but then they'll jump to another verse, and then another verse, and then another verse, and another verse, and like, my head's spinning, like I don't even know like where to go with this, and so it's very interesting. I think it's very, very needed. I will say too, I really admire the willingness of even though they're maybe not in the right, I do admire their willingness to go out and be around people and talk to people, and the missionaries, both for the Mormons and Jehovah's Witness. That's something in Christianity I think we really, really lack, is people willing to go have conversations with people. But kind of to kind of tail off the conversation here, if you were to be able to give some advice for, we'll do both people that are in the Mormon Church now, and then also maybe as a Christian that's wanting to reach out and talk to a Mormon. If you could give, and obviously you'll split it up, but if you can give just a quick piece of advice for each of those groups, what would that be? Both for Mormons there, but as a Christian that wants to go out and reach these people, what would you have to say for them?
Sure. So, I guess to start with, I guess for people who are in that and looking for something different, maybe you're watching this, but a good majority of you are going to be doing it in your closet secretly, and no one's going to be knowing about it. I have had quite a few ladies say, yeah, I started just watching YouTube. So maybe you're watching this. That'd be awesome if you're watching this. I'm talking to you, girlfriend. But I think the biggest thing would be, don't be afraid to ask questions, because if you are asking questions, God is always truth. He is always truth. So if you're asking questions, you're being told not to ask questions first off. But then also, if you're getting a whole bunch of junk, then that's not God, because God's not of confusion. So don't be afraid to go on a Jesus journey. And I know you're going to use the word Christ, girlfriend. I know you're going to use the word Christ. That's what they're going to say, and that's totally fine. If you want to say that, that's okay. But so I'll speak your language here. Go on a Christ journey. You need to be looking for Him and getting to know Him. And the best place to know Him is going to be right here. That's where you're going to find Him. John is where I would start, and just read it. And just read what it says. And you're going to be reading in the King James Version. So if you can, download the Bible app and maybe do it in the NLT or the NIV or something so you can understand a little bit better. And again, you don't have to tell anybody. You're doing this on your own. But that's what I would tell her. That's what I would say. Just go on that Jesus journey to start with. Because if you start on that Jesus journey, if you start looking for Him, you're not going to find it in places where He's not. You're going to find it in places where He is. And they call it the Word for a reason. They call this thing here, they call it the Word for a reason. It's where God speaks to you. So go there so you can hear His Word. Yeah. So that's going to be the first thing. Okay. Then for people who are trying to talk to people in the Mormon Church, and this gets a little funny, and I want to write like a whole book on this, but I do think that there are multiple different types of people in the Mormon Church. There was from myself, who was in a family with a convert. I think anytime one of those parents is a convert, it's automatically going to be different. They didn't grow up with it. It's going to just be different. There's a step back in the socialization. And so as long as there's one convert parent, it's always going to feel a little bit different. The door's going to be cracked open just a little bit more that maybe you can get in. But if you're talking to people who have been steeped in it for generations, like generational Mormons, you're going to have a lot harder time. I mean, in general, because that door is not just closed. I mean, it's locked. It's really closed. I find that most of the time people who have been generational Mormons, they typically leave because they find out something that they can't handle as far as the history goes. So they don't go looking for Jesus because they think they've already had him. They think they
Yeah.
know who God is. And so then they end up rejecting God totally because they find out something that they can't handle with the church. And that's really difficult then to be able, they're going to be real angry for a real long time and may find themselves like, on the kitchen floor in fetal position. And they're like, how can this not be true? And that's going to be a little bit different approach that you're going to go to with that person than someone who already has the door open a little bit and is truly looking for faith. And so I think you got to know your person. You got to know who
Okay.
it is that you're talking to. But either way, I mean, the answer is always going to be to read the Bible with them. If you could just sit down and get them to read the Bible with you and ask them questions, don't be afraid to ask them all the questions and be willing to listen and don't automatically argue. I think you have to build that. A huge part of what keeps them there is the people, and they believe they associate the people with God. And so if you are coming to them willing to argue with them, I mean, they'd rather just go back to their people. So I think you have to be willing to build this relationship that may take 10 years. It's a long game.
Yeah. Oh yeah, and that's so just obviously my experience is different than yours, but just to add on to that from what I've seen, and this goes for, I see evangelism in general, but I mean, come at it from a point of uh, grace and compassion, understanding that that individual that you're talking to is a child of God. They're created in God's image.
Mm-hmm.
He loves them immensely more than you ever could, and he loves them as much as he loves you. And that's a soul that he wants to be able to spend eternity with. And so that's something that I really like apologetics, and I've kind of shifted a lot recently to this idea of apologetics for the purpose of evangelism. So not just to try to win an argument or whatever. And so just really make sure. I know a lot of people, especially when I was growing up, there were people making jokes and slighted comments and things like that about some of these other groups like a Mormon or a Jehovah's Witness or things like that. That's not helpful whatsoever. Like it needs to be done with kindness. It needs to be done out of love and from a place of love. I'd say if you're not able to do that, then I wouldn't even attempt it, because you're probably going to end up making it harder for the next person that is going to try to do it in love. But no, that was really, really good. I like that. I will say we have a few minutes here left at the end. I do know that you have a podcast you do. I'll let you, if you want to plug that and anything else you have going on or anything else you want to throw out. If there's something we didn't touch on that you wanted to touch on, I'll let you have at it.
Sure. So my podcast is called Finding Faith Above, because that's what we're looking for. We're trying to find faith above, right, in God. So it's called Finding Faith Above. And really, I speak to not just to ex-Mormon women, because like I said, I had an interesting faith journey and went through lots of things. I end up speaking a lot to women who are even in the New Age or different things like that, who are really steeped in this place that the world really tries to tell you that you're enough all on your own. You don't need God. You're enough all by yourself. And why can't you do it all? And I feel like that is kind of a direct, like it came directly from my upbringing in the Mormon church, where it's very works based, in that your worthiness is dependent upon what you do. And that's how you're going to find favor with God. And then the world just kind of kept that going. And so I was really stuck in this for a really long time. And my experience, as I shared, like, did not bring me to that place. It was through surrender that I found peace of God. And so that's what I do on my podcast,
Okay.
though, is I talk to that space of helping women to find that they are enough through God.
Okay, sounds good. I go ahead.
Sorry, I just want to, I said it's findingfaithabove.com or Finding Faith Above. That's my podcast. Findingfaithabove.com is where you
All
can
right,
go
and
find
I'll
me.
if you want to send me links, I'll make sure I put it in the description so they can just click that and go straight to it. I'll say
Perfect.
too, I know you mentioned at some point you'd like to maybe write a book. If you ever do, I would be interested to see that, read that, and we could even bring you back on and we can discuss that more specific. But I've really appreciated you spending your time here today. It's been a really, really great conversation, and I do genuinely believe that people are going to end up being helped by this. If nothing else, just your willingness to talk about it and be open and transparent about what your journey's been and where you've been and what God has brought you to. So that's phenomenal, and I applaud that greatly. So that's all for today. Appreciate everyone listening, and stay tuned, and maybe we'll be able to get Shelby back on at some point for another conversation. So
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Everybody, thanks for watching Basically Biblical. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you always get notified when we come out with new content, which we do full videos once every week, and we have shorts come out throughout the week, even on the weekend some. So you can actually click up here and it will take you into the playlist this video is from. If you like that, you can see some more that's more specific to what you just watched, or you can check out down here and it'll take you to YouTube's top pick of our content for you specifically. Thanks. God bless.